And I'm sorry, I'm just so excited, right, to know that there are more people out there looking to do and to innovate the same way that we are. So my name is Kate Laser. I'm a chemical engineer by background.
Sorry, Kate, it seemed that the slide existed from presentation mode. Here we go, now it's correct.
There we go. Good. So I'm a chemical engineer by background. I'm from Colorado originally, and now I live on the East Coast. I've been with Henkel for about 17 years now. And I spent the majority of my time in pressure sensitive adhesives, so skin attachment materials, as well as packaging products. And I recently moved into our printed electronics division. So we do conductive inks and dielectrics and other electronic component materials. But I'll talk a little bit more about what Henkel is as a whole and where we fit there. I'd like to also introduce Pia Schmidl. She is based in Germany, and she is our business development manager for Europe for the medical space in our printed electronics group. So when I make mistakes or if I say something inaccurate, Pia is going to stop me and make sure that that I say the right things. And if there's any specific technical questions about the products or innovations that we're looking at or looking to develop, she'll be able to answer them where I can't. I will say that some of the slides might seem a little bit commercial, but I think a lot of what I wanted to present is the kinds of applications that we've been involved in, so you can understand our depth and breadth in the medical community and where you may or may not be able to help on the existing and commercial materials. But also I have some pretty significant asks, I think, of this group here, if you can help me as we start to innovate and develop specifically for wound care. So in general, if you're not familiar with Henkel, we are a huge multinational company. We're about $20 billion or 20 billion euros, excuse me. We've been around for about 150 years. We have two primary business units, our adhesive division and our consumer brands. So our industrial division, most people know brands like Loctite. For the consumer brands, it's Purex, it's Persil, it's Right Guard, it's Dial Soap, it's Snuggle, right? So there's a very interesting combination of industrial materials as well as commercial and retail kind of space. So for me, even though I am in the material side and we are a materials company, we have significant reach into consumer, industrial, and medical markets. So we can really balance and leverage our position as both a supplier as well as a consumer buyer across that value chain. So hopefully some of those brands resonate with you. And even if you didn't know us, I hope you understand a little bit more. So if we go a little bit more specifically into the details of what we've done in the medical space, so we have a very strong history of supplying materials into important medical applications. So electronic component assembly, overmold, with the protection of sensitive type materials like continuous glucose monitors, high-speed needle bonding, connections, medical tubing, those kinds of things. So because of the diversity of those applications, we sell into a lot of companies serving the medical market. Honestly, if you name a medical company or medical supplier, we are likely selling them something in some way. I am being asked, right, how we can leverage that position in that value chain with our extensive list of customers to do something a little bit more meaningful. So again, I just want to be clear because I'm going to be presenting some medical devices and things like that, right, where we tend to sit. And we are a materials company. We make functional inks, skin attachment adhesives, and materials and components that go into medical devices. And right now, right, we are happily selling our inks and those skin attachment adhesives to players all across the value chain, but we're pretty far removed in most cases from the end use application. And where we'd like to be is a little bit further down, right? Henkel is a large company. We have a lot of market knowledge. We have a lot of medical knowledge, and we think we can leverage that position to really be a greater part of that end use case, of that end use device. So we're trying to figure out how best to do that. And for us, right, that's meeting expectations in that medical market. We have kind of three pillars that we're working on. So the material side, with our years of expertise and the ability to formulate and develop adhesives and inks and other unique materials that are demanding in that medical space. we found that they can add functionality, right, to existing products, and that's a lot of our focus, right? So you can take a diaper, we can take a patch, we can take a wound care device and look to add additional functionality to that. So not just innovating from the ground up, but taking existing proven materials and applications and making them smarter. And I think that aligns really well with the vision of the C2SHIP and the folks who are certainly on this call today. In addition to that, right, I think there's medical know-how and medical experience that I think Henkel can bring to that particular table. But then the last piece here is how we can leverage ourselves and be a part as a whole of that ecosystem, right? So it's recognizing what your core competencies are and really are not, and finding and combining the right partners in that design, in manufacturing, in IoT, to bring all of these together to make market-ready solutions. So how do we as a materials company go to do that? So I talked a lot about how we can work together, right, to bring good solutions, but it's all been kind of high level at this point. So I wanted to bring it down into some of the specific applications that we've worked on in the past that aren't what you might think of when you think of Henkel as a detergent company or as a thread locker company, right? We see applications targeting multifunctional, smarter, and connected devices, really the way of the future. So I've outlined a couple of different specific applications in which our materials are being used, as well as what we have done to make these devices smarter and really more aligned with that healthcare in place kind of message. So we're involved in the drug delivery section. We're getting more into smart wearable materials. Point of care, like continuous glucose monitors, cardiovascular, meaning ECG, printed kind of circuits for remote health monitoring, hygiene solutions, as well as wound management, which is a little bit not quite as developed as some of the others. So I wanted to talk about two specific use cases today, just so you get a better understanding of the kinds of things that we are working on, even though these are two specific use cases, right? This is an example of the kinds of applications that we are working on, and we're looking certainly for other ways and other applications where we can apply what we've learned, what we've done, and what we've made. So the first one here is smart adult care. And if I go back just a sorry. Oh, okay. If I go back just a little bit, there are applications, I think, when we're talking about healthcare in place that could either be in the institutional space or the at-home space. This particular solution would be for the institutional space, so in healthcare facilities. So the challenge for us here, brought by our hygiene companies and a couple of other folks, partners in the hygiene market, they recognize that incontinence for patients in care facilities might be at risk, right, for bed sores, for skin maceration. And in addition, right, you have an overburdened healthcare system, certainly since COVID, that something as simple as changing an adult diaper may lead to an infection that has significant impact for that particular patient and that particular facility. So how did we do that, right? How did we go about solving that? We worked with, we have a co-development with important players in the hygiene market space. I'm actually going to move this over here. Sorry. With hygiene manufacturers, as well as institutional healthcare facilities, right? So what ultimately came out of this was a remote monitoring smart adult diaper. I hate the word diaper, but that's really what it is. And I want to make sure everything is clear there. So the nurses in the care facility are alerted at the status of their patients in kind of a traffic light manner using a central monitor at the nursing station. So what specifically came out of this, right? Our team was able to develop and commercialize a moisture sensing ink. We worked with a technology company to develop software, firmware, and hardware, as well as applications to monitor those patient changes and communicate that effectively to the healthcare team. And we've started successful clinical trials at an EU-based healthcare facility in Italy. So I just want to talk a little bit more about what that is. And if we could, I've had some issues with the audio. So if somebody could just comment if you cannot hear it, please let me know.
We can hear it.
2030, for the first time in human history, people older than 60 years will outnumber children aged 0 to 9. As the global population gets older, certain health conditions become more prevalent. More than 25% of those above 80 suffer from incontinence, which is more than 150 million people globally. Incontinence has unpleasant side effects, discomfort, stress, and a loss of human dignity. Up to 1 in 4 people with incontinence suffer from dermatitis or bed sores, leading to a massive decrease in the quality of life. Not only does this impact patients, but also caregivers who are constantly worrying about the health status of more of their patients. Is it the right time for a diaper change? Do I need to reposition my patient now? Incontinence and its problems will continue to overwhelm patients and caregivers emotionally and physically. But now we have a smart solution to help. A solution that improves the lives of patients and caregivers. A solution that transforms a conventional diaper into a smart, connected medical device. Equipped with a lightweight, flexible printed sensor and smart pod, our smart adult care solution enables remote monitoring of moisture, movement, and temperature. The diaper is connected with an intuitive app, which provides caregivers with valuable data and actionable advice. The complete solution was developed in line with medical-grade safety standards. There are many benefits. Having faster response times reduces chronic health problems like dermatitis and pressure sores by 50%. As there is no need to routinely check on pads, caregivers save more than 60 minutes per patient per week, ultimately creating more time and energy for other valuable care activities. By reducing the number of diaper changes by up to 25%, institutions save costs and materials. Smart adult care is a vital step into the future of patient-centered care, from guessing to knowing. From stress to relief. From smarter to better. Henkel Adhesive Solutions.
So I hope everybody was able to kind of see that and take a little bit more look. Like I said, I think it's a little bit more commercial, but I think it just shows some of the depth and breadth of our commitment, I think, to the medical and hygiene space. So just in general, and then summary, I guess, of the adult care use case. In general, we want to make sure, right, that there is absolute value for anything new that's coming out, right? So comfort and health of the patient, time savings for the caregiver, and material savings for the healthcare system, certainly as it's overburdened. So we see pretty significant reductions in dermatitis and pressure sores. There is significant time saved by nurses or caregivers, and fewer materials in terms of diapers that would be used for those particular patients, relating to somewhere between 2,000 and 4,000 euros per year per patient. But honestly, I think a lot of that savings is more about knowing, right? It's more about that thought and understanding. It's not another thing that you have to think of as a nurse. The second use case we have is a remote monitoring COVID patch that our team was able to be a part of. So this was less about institutional care and more about home care. So if we kind of pull ourselves all the way back to 2020, the challenge in the public eye, as we all know, right, was an immediate need for some kind of, in our mind, remote monitoring system that would allow patients to remain at home for as long as possible while hospitals were filling up and medical industry was facing unprecedented staffing shortages. So we were expected to develop a new device quickly, right? And to do that, really cooperation was key. And it really can be difficult to manage all of the people and all of the capabilities that can be involved when innovating, especially for such a complex stack up. So our approach in incorporating a number of different players in that ecosystem, in this case, it was about 6 companies that needed to be partnered, right? We all came together and developed a remote monitoring patch that measured temperature, heart rate, respiration rate, and oxygen saturation. And today it's currently being used in 20 hospital networks in Europe. And it was all done in less than 6 months. And that's a really fast timeline when you think about all of the materials that are used, how it would have to be manufactured, and the partnership and alignment between the different players of that ecosystem. Some of that had to do with some pre-qualification of the materials that were already available, but also the need and drive from governments and other institutions to get solutions approved relatively quickly. So in terms of highlights here, right, what do we think were innovation highlights that might be able to be applied to other applications, other things? The development of an innovative dry electrode adhesive where you don't need a hydrogel specifically. And the specific and unique benefit of that is really wear, right? Somewhere between 12 and 24 hours would be a limit for hydrogel-based electrodes, at least in our experience. And this can get you somewhere between 5 and 7 days. I think it's rated for 7 days specifically for the electrode portion. There's also a stretchable low temperature ink, and then successful leveraging of that ecosystem. So I'll just play an overview video of that particular solution as well. Great. So after those two use cases, right, our team and Pia and I specifically were targeted with, are there other applications, are there other areas in the healthcare space in which we can start to apply our end-to-end data-driven solutions? And one of the things that came up was wound care, right? Can we make an impact in wound care? And that's really where we are today. So we see some pretty significant challenges in wound care, and that's where we met you, Dr. Najafi, and more members of this wound care ecosystem, because we see a pretty significant need. So just under $10 billion are spent annually just in the United States to manage chronic wounds in North America. There seem to be few commercial options available for that remote management of wounds, and really helping to get those patients as they transition back to their homes. The process that we're using to try to better understand this and see if it's something that that we can help with is a sprint type approach, right? So we want to make sure that we can understand and validate technical feasibility, commercial viability, and market desirability for these kinds of applications, right? Can we do it? Does anybody care if we do it? And can we make money while we do it, right? We have to be able to answer all of those questions. And a lot of that has to do with the right partners we would need to. Right? So we need to navigate that wound care ecosystem and develop that network of meaningful partnerships as we innovate for the future. So I don't have a solution. I don't have a video. I don't have any fancy paperwork on this one because it is something that we are looking to better understand. And that's part of why I'm here today, right? Is we are looking for experts, brands, and partners in these different work streams, right? So we're looking for sensors that can develop and detect the right biomarkers. We're looking for cloud software, firmware experts to help us integrate, right, hospital network systems as an example. If we look at desirability, right, are there wound care specialists or folks in academia who are interested in understand how we might be able to partner, how we might be able to innovate? And then I think on the commercial viability section, for me, I don't fully understand, right, the insurance and reimbursements. And so if there are folks who might be able to help us connect with experts in that reimbursement space for insurances or Medicare or Medicaid, that's certainly something we're looking for, as well as wound care brands, right, who would have channel to sales. So to be clear, right, we are a raw materials company. I am not looking to have a Henkel branded wound care product, but we have materials, we have experts, we have financial resources where it makes sense to help be a bigger part of this broader development if we can leverage where our strengths lie. So for us, that's really what we are. We are one side of this ecosystem, and we're continuing to look for additional partners to help us make something meaningful. So going from just raw materials, material space, to leveraging real human beings, right, to make something meaningful. And that's all I have.
Wow, that was amazing. So definitely, as you mentioned, it's exactly in line of the mission of the C2SHIP. Actually, I should send you, a couple of years ago, we wrote a review paper, and we discussed about some of the metrics that actually are very relevant to remote patient monitoring for wound care. And I know that there are great faculties here. We have Dr. David Klonov, the editor-in-chief of Journal of Diabetes Science and Technology, that I know that he's very interested in this area. We have also some of the leadership from Medline that I know that they are very interested about the wound management, and that might be another interesting partnership with you. But before discussing about the wound, I would like to ask a question from first part of the study about the patch, actually middle part that you used for COVID. I remember it was a decade ago at that time, about as I was at the University of Arizona, and there was a company named Zephyr Life that now was acquired by actually Medtronic. They came up with that patch that measure skin temperature, they measure respiratory rates, they measure activity and heart rate, and they achieve to predict pressure ulcer, management pressure ulcer, for care coordination, additionally for sleep apnea and many measurements. And then they said that they would like to implement it in the hospital setting. And I was super excited because it was in wearable technology, it was very elegant system. So I said that we will implement in our hospital. I went to the CEO of the hospital and presented the idea. And our CEO of hospital said that there is no way that we can incorporate that technology because they have a liability issue. With those measurements that you are providing, if you are not educating our nursing staff how to action based off the data that they're reporting to us, it may cause some problem with us. But long story short, ultimately, we find out that we have a huge problem with the fall in hospital in the setting, and we would like to get magnet resignation. And ultimately, this is what we came, but we need to deactivate many of other streams that we have, not showing to any staff when the patient care coordinators to be able to do that research. How you manage those liability issues with those sensors that provide many information, and ultimately from those information, if somebody doesn't act on timely manner, it can cause some liability concern for the hospital setting.
I think it's a really good question. Pia, would you have any answers specifically to that? I have my own opinion, but I'd like you to go first if you would.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. No, it's a very good question, and I think a very important topic to address. So how we typically, as we are working together with startups, you saw in the video, in the health patch video, we're working here closely with a company called Biteflies, for example, but that's not limited to that. But here I want to give this specific use case example. So here, Biteflies is the end owner of the solution. So they are bringing it to market, and we, as Henkel, give the support of course, of the technical side, on the material side, but also then at some point help them scale on a commercial level. But from that perspective, the liability here still lies with the startup technology, and we are taking more the role of supporting them in scaling up in different ways.
Okay.
So maybe Kate, you can add your
Yeah, I think that's the exact same thing really that I would say, right, is that we are helping to support the innovation, but we're not ultimately responsible for its commercialization or management of that private data, right? That may change. We may be more interested in it. I think from the wound care side, probably not, knowing what I know about Henkel. So that's a big space, right? And you need to be very well educated. I think you need to be well experienced to manage those kinds of sensitivities, not only with GDPR and patient sensitivity, but to your point, right? What happens if a doctor doesn't act and they have that notification of information? Are there other liabilities by the collection of that data and a failure to act?
Yes, that's great. So I know that Dr. Klonov, you became interested about, I'm guessing, glucose monitoring, and you are one of the top researchers in this field. I saw that you sent a question, but it seemed directed to me, not to everyone. Please feel free to ask your question.
Yeah, well, Right now, one of the most widely used wearable devices is a continuous glucose monitor. Another widely used device is an insulin patch pump. These devices use adhesives now. I don't know if they come from your company, from the leading manufacturers, but many people have allergies to these adhesives, especially to isobornyl acrylate. And I wondered if you are working with an actual continuous glucose monitor, or rather that you would like to work with one, because you mentioned it twice. And if you are working with one, what are you doing to try to minimize skin allergy?
That is a really good question. I think there may be different elements where that allergic reaction might come, right? So my specific expertise would be on the attachment adhesive. There are adhesives and other materials that are part of the component makeup of those continuous glucose monitors, right? So
no, I mean the attachment adhesive. Like what you say, the attachment adhesive.
Yeah, the skin attachment adhesive. Yeah, yes. So that overlay on whether it's a non-woven type material or polyurethane type material. So there are a variety of different skin adhesives that could be used. We are absolutely in contact with folks, with the CGM folks, right, to make sure that we are constantly developing or looking to understand and test new materials that may or may not have that allergic reaction. I would say that there are capabilities, because we're a oh my goodness, a company that sells to retail, and we have skin products. We have an accredited skin lab up in Connecticut where a lot of our materials are tested. Obviously, everything is ISO 10993, but they would pass all of those materials. But allergies are a little bit different. So there are a variety of different adhesives and makeups that you might be able to use. So I don't know if you're asking for that specifically. There are alternatives, and we are certainly aware of those potential allergies and working to make new adhesives for that skin project.
Well, you mentioned the term continuous glucose monitors twice. So I was wondering if you are publicly disclosing that you are providing the adhesive for a commercial marketed continuous glucose monitor.
I don't know if it's something that we are allowed to talk about. So I don't think I would say. We absolutely have adhesives and are commercially selling adhesives that can be used for long-term wear applications like continuous glucose monitors.
Okay, I'll reach out to you later. Also, I wanted to ask, when you said that you're in contact with CGM company, is that a joke in the adhesive field? You're in contact with them?
You know, I get a lot of glue jokes, and that's the first one. You're the first one to tell me that one. So that's a new one.
Yeah.
For 17 years, that's saying something.
This is very interesting. I actually, in the area of the wound, definitely glucose monitoring is one of the biomarkers that we are looking for, because when we like to manage wound, of course, we are interested to see adherence to the offloading. We like to look at the level of the stress, and glucose definitely is one of the parameters that often is overlooked, and we would like to have it. And beside of that, some of the metrics that represent the nutrition, because simply we may have malnutrition of patient with wound, and that can delay the wound healing. So we are actually asked that, wondering what other biomarkers are measurable from diaper. Could you please elaborate that, because already diaper measure many metrics, and they mentioned that. What other metrics are you looking for?
In the smart diaper or wound care?
The smart diaper.
So the smart diaper, Pia, maybe you can expand on that a little bit more. Moisture and position are primary.
Yeah, exactly. So we are not only measuring the liquid level, so it's about liquid level setting. It's a capacitive sensor we printed in there. So between the first and second, the first and the third line, we measure in a capacitive way the liquid levels, but not only if it's wet, yes or no, but also the percentage of fulfillment from 10 to 30 to 70%, basically to a value where it needs to be changed. What we cannot measure today is feces. So that's, I'm hoping I'm spelling that correctly, but that's something we cannot sense as of now. But also what in the little pod here that's clipped to the diaper, we can measure the body positioning. So also the caregiver can at some point reposition the patient to prevent them from any kind of decubitus or pressure ulcers at the end. So also delivering better care in the end towards the patient, and saving overall in the end then some cost towards the healthcare system by preventing further damages to the patient. And yeah, I think other parameters which might be interesting to measure in the future are like, for example, body temperature, and then the correlating indicators towards any kind of maybe movement or even towards the, let's say, stool profile from the patient. So then that's, I think, a lot of markers which I haven't, still are to combined, and same as how much value can these combinations can give in the future towards a better patient care.
Very interesting. So I saw that there are several questions that I'd love to call out with you, but what are your criteria about partnership? How you selected your partner from industry standpoint, that for instance, designing firmware, cloud software, to even academic side that they can, for example, partner with you? What is the process that you're seeing here?
That's a really good question. I think we are still relatively new in understanding how we can navigate that ecosystem and how we determine our partners. Right now, it's a very manual process, right? So we have conversations like this. We say, here is what we're looking at. Here's the resources we have. Here's the goal that we're trying to accomplish. This is where we're really good. This is where we're not so good. Please help us understand how we might be able to work together. So right now, it's very manual. It's kind of it's a one-on-one. There are multiple ways that we might be able to work together, right? From a business side, and that's where me and Pia and Melanie would be a part, right? Where we would have a direct discussion. We have different groups within Henkel if there are requirements for additional monies, usually, right? So we have a corporate venture capital group that would invest anywhere from $1 million to $5 million in a general partnership, and we would need their help because we would need their access to money, to be very transparent. And then we have a different group called Building the New that would invest between 5 million and 500 million, which is more set on acquisition, that have their own set of criteria. So there are many different ways we engage. I think myself and Pia, we're looking to understand from a technology perspective how we might be able to incorporate someone's technology for a finished device where the benefit would be everybody gets sales on their own. If there are additional requirements of investment beyond that, there are different groups. We could absolutely help to navigate, but I do want to manage expectations that we're not that great at it, and we don't own the purse strings, Kate and Pia.
Sounds great. So hopefully C2SHIP can help to make that kind of connection. So Professor Roberta, I'm saying that you're raising your hands. Please feel free and ask your question.
Sorry, I jumped it completely. I know people are asking other questions because one thing I'm very, very curious. From one end, we definitely need to follow up after I discuss with one of our team. So one of the questions, probably a couple of questions. One of the things I have is that you already showed, for example, the smart diaper, the smart wearable. And but you also said, oh, you are looking for partners to do the firmware. So right now, do you already in-house develop the firmware, or actually you have some prototype? But because one of the key components that we found out is, even though sometimes your prototype can last for 14 days, but due to, for example, Bluetooth and edge computing platform not very stable, constantly we find out that after maybe an hour or 2 hours, sometimes the connection was not even there anymore. Believe it or not, these minor things, the minor details, sometimes derailed our couple of our basically clinical trials, literally. So these are the minor details. Yeah, so I just want to clarify a little bit. Thank you.
So we are beyond the prototype phase for those two particular applications, right? They are being used in hospitals. They are being used in care facilities. I think you bring up a really, really good point. There's a lot of theoretical accuracies, right, that we need to validate practically. Internet speed, location and proximity to where those internet nodes are or Bluetooth nodes are, those all need to be tested specifically, right, in that particular, say, care facility or patient's home. And they can be an absolute bottleneck into getting the product really generally used. So there's a lot of care. There's a lot of things that we learned, I think specifically from the smart diaper, just how much care we need for practical implementation of something of that scale.
It's great. So I'm seeing that actually many people, they love to actually pitch their ideas. They have an idea about AI, UI interface I know that we have great faculties that design flexible sensors. We have some others that work in the wound space, like near-infrared spectroscopy, that actually now recently some of our studies, they show that it can provide us very useful information for pressure ulcer, as well as for the healthy wound healing. So I was wondering that whether it may be possible that you share your email, and I'm guessing another way that we can facilitate, if you have some idea that you want to pitch, if you can write it in the project. Of course, December also we have a pitch project, so we can also share these with Pia and Kate, and you can guide them to when ultimately you pitch your major idea, you may have a chance to get that kind of partnership. Is it accurate, Kate, or what other way do you think that they can pitch their idea or the idea of the partnership to you?
No, I think that's really best. I don't, Pia, if you have another way, we would probably employ, if there's a number of different inquiries, we can employ a number of our group that's part of the Smart Wound Care product or project and program. And we have the diaper program, we have the patch program. So there's about 15 to 20 resources on each of those programs, and we might be able to navigate between those groups where it makes the most sense. But I'll give you my information and Pia's information, and we can go from there. To talk a little bit more, I think, about the wound care specifically, or to have access to samples, we would require a non-disclosure agreement, and we'd have to work with that. But I think that's all very standard. You all would like to protect your information and IP as well.
That sounds great. So I saw that Sean Finn has interesting questions about the new product. Always we are discussing about the technology acceptance model, the impact going among aging population and caregivers, how they see the perceive of the benefit, how they see perceive of the ease of use. And Sean asks that, do you have anything about experience of the user of smart diapers, or have you interviewed those users, and what are their concerns about the technology anxiety, data sharing, acceptability, or even the kind of the information they get and they don't know how to act on it, in particular if you're targeting caregivers?
I think it's a good question. A critical difference, I think, between the COVID patch and the smart diaper is where it's used and how it's used. So the smart diaper right now is used in institutional care. So they're typically bedridden patients in elder care facilities. I know that there are multiple clinical trials that have gone on because it's a commercial product. I think we could be able to share some of that background, certainly if we had an NDA. That there is definitely information like that is being collected. I don't personally have it.
Great. And I was wondering that the faculty can team up with you on publishing some of those results. Maybe you can explore some of those data and maybe can contribute on dissemination of the results.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I don't know where the diaper team is, the commercialization team is, but I know they want to get more and more of their information out there because we want to sell more and more diapers, right? We'll be transparent about it. But let's see how we might be able to do that, how we might be able to spread the word and connect. And if there is specific information that the industry is looking for, then we should absolutely be pulling that together and publishing it as quickly as possible.
Great. So I'm seeing that. Pia, do you want to add something, or?
Yeah, just a short notice. So the diaper team, the major team of them, they're sitting in Düsseldorf in Germany, so they had Henkel headquarters. So any questions you also might have, or if you'd like to learn more about that technology, we are happy to connect you. It's like commercial team of 3 to 4 people who are like mainly working in Europe currently on that. And we did recently a nice trial in an Italian care institution and have already some results, which we think also would be able to share under a disclosure agreement. So that would be
That's
fun.
great. So I'm very happy to see that actually Margaret, co-chair of Industry Advisory Board member and expert in the wound healing from Medline, she's here. Margaret, do you have any questions to ask?
Well, I just wanted to let Kate know I just sent you my contact information. So the wound space is, of course, my baby, but I literally had an hour-long conversation about the smart diaper we're working on launching. So, and we're developing it with a Canadian company. So I would love for you to get in touch, hold of me very quickly, because I want to put the product manager and the vice president over that whole project. to see where they are. I gave them an hour-long feedback based on exactly what you just talked about, the liability issue, how we store the data, what data we store, how we'll communicate, track it, the whole 9 yards, the size of the sensors, so you're not building up a pressure point under the patient. So, and what action will the staff have to take, how the alerts will work. So I would love to at least have a conversation to see if there is an opportunity there, or if they have some gaps in what they're trying to develop and bring to market.
That's fantastic. We absolutely can. I saw you send your contact, so absolutely. I'll follow up with you directly, Margaret. Thank you.
Awesome. So I'm seeing that actually, Matt, you added some questions here. Could you please elaborate on your question with technology readiness level?
Yeah, the TRL is something that's used everywhere from NASA to small technology development institutions. And I was just curious if you guys are scaling or determining where your product is based on the ISO TRL level, or if this is something that you're kind of still piecing together. I'm curious where you guys are in the overall development. I mean, you showed a couple great ideas, and it seems like the diaper is very close to, you know, a TRL 9. But you still have some things to figure out in terms of the systems integration. In terms of some of the other things that you showed, I was just curious if you are judging them on some kind of TRL level.
I don't know how to answer that specifically, right? The end use product for these is ultimately not Henkel. So it's difficult for me to comment on that. Like Margaret said, right, it would be a Medline owned product, or it would be a Procter & Gamble type product, just as an example there. So I can't comment on it specifically, other than from a technology perspective and a materials perspective. The prototyping is finished. We are beyond proof of concept, or beyond MVP for those applications. And it's really just confirming that everything we're doing can actually be practically applied and used in a real healthcare setting. I think the COVID patch application, because we're working with smaller companies, we can be more nimble, but we don't have the same kind of channel to market that a big hygiene type company might, right? So I think it's absolutely being used, absolutely proven. How do you get it more widely used outside of Belgium and Europe, right? Absolutely looking to figure out how we can do that. The wound care is, we are absolutely at proof of concept, right? We would love to be able to measure temperature, pH, and moisture. And we are only at proof of concept at that point. And I think pH sensors are something that will be the highest bar in terms of technology. So I'm going to be on all of these calls on Fridays to see if I can find somebody who has a pH sensor or ability to develop something like that. But I don't know if that answers your question, Matt. But
yeah, that's good enough. I think it would be worthwhile for you guys to look into the ISO TRL levels. Okay. Especially when you're dealing with external integrators. It's something that's internationally standardized, and in the technology world, a lot of people do use this. I can send a link on it now.
That's amazing. So I saw that actually there are some other comments, suggestions coming, but I would like to a little shift the gear. But please, if you're not comfortable to answer, I fully understand. It's about the business modeling. Again, when we are coming to aging population and people who are not necessarily tech savvy, always the question here is that who should look at this data and make a decision? I give you an example of a scenario that we did before. It was a temperature monitoring for prediction of diabetic foot ulcer. And we know that several companies that came to that market, they show that the system is working through smart socks, a smart insole, a smart mat, but they realize that if they provide this information to caregivers or patient themselves, they become anxious. Even you can increase their stress because, for example, the temperature is going up. There are signs of inflammation. What they can do, they're stuck on that level. And then there was a company that figured out that, no, we need to have a third party who just like a nursing station that they look at on vital sign of the patient, and then they make a decision, and the alert or nursing that they get, that they're trained how to act on it. That third party would be the job that only those who are getting this information, and then will coach patient and their caregivers on the management. Is it this kind of the business modeling that you're saying, that instead of providing those information to caregivers and patients, maybe considering a third party will look at these data. It could be doctors, could be nursing. We have a group of reimbursement codes came on 2022 for remote patient monitoring. Is it the way that you are seeing that finally those technology can go on hands of patient and their caregivers to provide the care to their loved one?
Absolutely. So we've had a couple of different conversations, right, with caregivers and wound care specialists. Because when we talk about a specific use case for wound care, it's we're choosing diabetic foot ulcers for a number of different reasons, and we can certainly talk about why that would be in the future. But when we talk to folks, right, how do you want to engage with it? And I do think it's a little different for like the smart diaper application. The nurses were more open to understanding when and how they are getting an alert, right? Oh, I need to go change John's diaper, right, in room 102. The question of whether or not bioparameters around a wound care, do they want to get alerts? That message is a little different, I think, for the clinicians. And a number of our physicians that we spoke to, specifically around diabetic foot ulcers, are we don't necessarily want it to come to me constantly because then I might ignore it, right? And aligning with some of the reimbursement codes, it seems more like there would be a third party or an application or a cloud or a website that the doctor at that time, right, would recognize or remember that the patient is at home or in a wound care facility, and they would be able to check their progress on a website. So it's not automatically coming to them. It's a place where they go to learn and understand. So I don't know how or who manages that, if that would be a Henkel database, if that would be a third-party database management, if it would be part of the hospital system or network. I'm not fully sure on that side. We certainly, if we sign an NDA, we can talk about how it's being done for smart diapers as well as for the COVID patch, but it's still up in the air for wound care. Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. It's great. I remember actually one experience that we have in one of our research that we used a 4,000 product, their muscle on the wound, and the nurses at home, when they went there, they taught they debride wound and they removed that product out of the wound because they didn't have a good education about some of the wound care aspect, and only they have some limited training about debridement and some of the care, and they may not be familiar with advanced care. So having a remote patient monitoring with all of those educational component would be very valuable. Actually, one of our members is the SmartTech 21. It's a British company that came up with a virtual care assistant that actually they manage those kind of the cloud and even AI and coaching caregivers that how they can better train them, that they don't mess up with some of the training, treatment that we have for the patient, like that experience that I mentioned, that simply nurses remove 4,000 products from the wound because they thought that this is infected the skin. Yeah. I'm guessing that we cover all the questions. It was inspiring talk. There are many people who are very excited about it. I got several requests about sharing your email address with the members. I was wondering that whether I have your consent to share that email, or if it's okay with you, maybe you can share it in the chat box so others can have access to it. Otherwise, with your permission, if somebody asks me, I will share your email address with them.
Yep, absolutely. You can share my email address. I put it in the chat for everybody to look at. Is there a way for me to get, other than just copying and pasting, can I get the comments just so I can make sure that I...
Sure, absolutely. Actually, Maria will share all the comments with you.
Yes, I'll send them over.
Okay.
Yeah, so there will be a meeting, sort of a record also on the chat, just not the direct chat, but the comment chat area.
Okay.
Kate, just to let you know, you've been replying to me only, so you need to reply to everyone.
Oh, goodness. Okay, I will reply to everybody then. Sorry.
So Margaret, I also sent you a chat. Could you take a look? I also followed with an email.
I saw it come over, so I will certainly do.
Okay.
And Kate, if you don't mind, if you can share your slides with me, that would be awesome, because that was fascinating slide. There was a lot of learning point for our members and our faculties. That was fascinating talk. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And happy Friday, everyone, and see you next week. Again, next week, And Kate, you may be interested in, because actually exactly there are some